Hey guys, what's up? It's Schla coming back to ya with another episode of Walk Switch Schla. And yeah, I think the iPhone 13 mini was going to was I don't know why I just worded it like that. I think I just left it on. I don't really understand how I did that, but I must have just put it in my phone bag and not seen that it was still on because it was within the phone bag. So its screen was blocked from my viewage and the brightness wasn't able to protrude outwards. Now, there's a very important thing I forgot to do. I need to export the audio from the 14 plus, because if I don't do that, then the timing is going to be off and it's going to be really confusing. So I have to remember when I get back in there to actually export the audio that's on the 14 plus, because again, I didn't do it, and it's going to be very confusing already as is, or very extra to have to go onto the 14 plus to grab this audio recording and then go to the next. Because I do have a deeper conversation to think about, because I was just thinking about it. I don't really know why I haven't put a ton of thought into it like before now, but I guess I have kind of thought about it maybe in the back of my mind from time to time. And it's this idea of, how does God view things? And how does God see different human behaviors and judge them? You know, it kind of started from this idea that I wonder if a lot of people, they don't feel guilt if they had a spouse, a husband or a wife who was wealthy enough to take care of them. They would, use that opportunity to not work, right? And basically be able to live a ridiculously, unfairly easy life. I had just looked up the percentage of humans that actually live in peaceful, nice environments globally, and it's right around, at most, 20%. So it's really, under 20% of humans that actually live in stable, safe areas and environments in the world. The world is still very dangerous nowadays. There's a plethora of areas in the world where if you walked through, you could die pretty easily, not only due to natural calamity, but also due to other people doing very evil things. And so I wonder how people don't feel like tremendously guilty when, like, just because they happen to marry somebody who's rich, or even not even marry, just be in a relationship with someone who's rich, and then now they don't have to work, so they just don't, because, like, I don't know, life's easier. I don't think people understand, like, globally and in terms of the history of humanity, how privileged of a decision that is. And I would assume that people in those positions just aren't really conscious of that, and just don't really care about it and don't really see it mattering. So they're just not conscious of it, don't think it matters, and they just end up abusing it. Just don't even think about it, don't even care. A lot of these people, they just don't work, and I think it's morally really not a good thing. I mean, I don't know, especially if you have children and you could be giving extra money to your children. I think it's easy to see the side of the argument I'm trying to make. Now, I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit different if you don't have kids. I think it's more morally acceptable, but I still think it has a lot of moral and ethical caveats, because it's like, why should somebody just not have to work just because they got lucky and are in a relationship or married to somebody who's rich? Like, to me, that doesn't seem fair. And again, in like a fair and just society, you wouldn't have stuff like that. You know, nobody would just be able to get away with, oh, well, because my significant other is rich, now I don't have to work. You would feel guilty about that. And that's kind of what I would want to ask people. And I guess I will just ask GPT, because, you know, GPT obviously can kind of give me insight into this. What do people really just not feel guilty about that? It's the same way with how if somebody wins the lottery, it's dirty money. It's money that is likely a majority of the money you're getting for winning the lottery is coming out of the pockets of broke people who are starved of hope and struggling to survive. Why would you feel good about winning that money? It's dirty money. It's filthy. You know, it's filthy money, and yet people still like partake in the lottery and, you know, some people would probably feel guilt-free about winning it, but that doesn't remove the negative karma. It doesn't remove the negative karmic effect from partaking in the system. Even people who gamble and end up winning from gambling, you're winning money that is majority from the pockets of people who probably can't afford to do it in the first place. It's filthy, grimy money. And I don't know, I guess I wonder how God judges like the casino owners and the lottery owners and stuff, because of course they would make the argument, well, we're just letting people do their own fruition. We're not forcing anybody to do anything. But I would assume there would be some kind of a pretty steep karmic consequence for all these people who create these like gambling systems, whether it's in video games and you're getting like children to blow a bunch of money, or, you know, actual casinos, the lottery, sports betting. It's all dirty and filthy. It's not anything that's actually morally clean. And it's because, you know, most of the time it's going to be money coming out of poor people. Fees get taken off of that, which end up going to rich people. And then over time, chances are higher that rich people would just win more and more, because a rich person can buy more lottery tickets. It doesn't even affect them to do so. And a poor person is actually limited in the amount of lottery tickets they can buy, and are also more likely to buy into it. So it's just objectively immoral. Pretty much all forms of gambling or raffling, I think in a perfect and a just world, we have to get rid of them all. And I've spoken on this before about engineering risk out of society as much as possible. You know, there's obviously certain things that are unpreventable, but having like pretty thick and heavy insurances for things that, you know, would happen to people that aren't good, I think that's like an important thing. You know, car insurance that actually covers you. Not only that, people caring more about preventing little accidents and things like that from happening. But anyways, this kind of turns into, because you think about God's creation and how he created man and woman initially, and how I guess a man and woman would be judged differently in a traditional society. You know, in a traditional society, a woman not working, it probably doesn't even generate any negative karma, right? Because at that time, that expectation is completely reasonable. But if you fast forward to nowadays, I don't like it. Almost doesn't make any sense because the way the system is now, it's basically nearly impossible for a woman to not work. I mean, there's some guys who would be able to afford it, but the economy's really tight, and it's also been structurally designed to basically have dual income, as like an equal thing. That's like the whole point of the way things are structurally architected now. It's like every bill is basically supposed to be split, right? If you're, rent looks crazy, but the whole idea is we split all the wages equally between men and women. So while rent at first looks like an insane amount of money, if you're in a relationship and you guys split the rent, then it becomes like feasible. And that's basically what happened. We created a like an equal wage kind of society, and that's a caveat of that, is that now you can't really have those traditional relationships, or it's possible, because again, there could be like, I would want to say the top 10 or 20% of income earners who would be able to afford it. But the problem is a lot of these men, well, I'm going to say men, but it could be women. I mean, I'm just saying it's usually men who are providing and women who are receiving. They're mostly older. They're not really going to be younger people because, again, I don't know. So when it comes to young people, like in their 20s or 30s, I think that's definitely basically the 10%, the top 10% of people who could actually afford to do that kind of stuff. I mean, I guess it's different if you get into like, well, maybe it's just deadbeats who like, it's one broke guy working full time and they don't really want to have a child or anything, and they have some like tiny crammed apartment. Yeah, and maybe there's some generational privilege where like stuff can work. But I guess I'm talking about people who want to make enough money to do all the things that you would do in life, like have a family, eventually buy a house. Like, it's basically, we engineered an equal society, which means you have to be cooperative. You have to work together. A man cannot just pave the way. You have to have a man and a woman both make money equally, relatively equally, and cooperate, in order to buy a home or in order to pay for rent, or, split bills in half. Because before it would have been more of a man's job, but it made sense because a man made more money. So of course that expectation fits like a glove, because if a man had a higher wage, then of course they would be able to afford to provide, but it's not that way anymore. It hasn't really been that way for, I would say, at least around like at least 2 decades, possibly even 3. And so these pretty significant economic changes have happened, but people's mindsets and brains largely have not. There is a very small amount of people who are actually like intelligent enough to really get a grip and understand that that is like the system. It's a very equal, very cooperative, very fair system between the two genders. But then you still have people who like wake up and their biological or their like primal urges are going to be archaic. They're still going to be, for example, expecting their partner to provide. They're going to want to not have to provide. And so we've kind of engineered a system that isn't really working, because humans haven't really evolved much at all. I mean, when you look at like how long it takes a species to evolve, it takes a while. Like for, every other change that has happened, it's been like extremely slow. So animals don't really adapt well rapidly. They need like pretty long stretches of time to process incremental changes over time. And that has not been allowed to happen in this case, right? Like, there has not been time for small incremental changes or anything like that. It's just been this rapid change, and a lot of people didn't really ask for it. A lot of people weren't necessarily cognizant of it. Some people fought for it, but it's likely that the people who fought for equal rights didn't really understand any of these potential issues. Like, it was just people in the moment fighting for something. Not saying it's, I mean, I actually think it's for the better. I think it's like a progression in humanity. But anyways, they didn't understand any of these caveats. And I think a lot of people, they're actually not that intelligent when it comes to supporting political movements or doing these things. I think they're just doing it because it like feels good. Like why wouldn't they, right? It's just on paper. I don't think a lot of people think very, very far when it comes to politics or political consequences. So then you had those people instill those things, and even still, it's possible that in the 1900s, when a lot of this stuff happened, people back then were pretty wise and vigilant about it. And it's possible that they did know what they were doing, and they thought that you would have this future where, you know, men and women worked cooperatively, equally, hand in hand. But then fast forward 50 or 60 years, you have new people being born, and they're born into the system. They don't really understand why it's there or anything like that, and their primal urges are still in the archaic or the traditional sense. They haven't evolved, they haven't shifted. Just because like their parents fought for women's rights, that doesn't really affect how maybe the actual woman themselves would feel born. And same with men in the same way. Like, some men are still gonna want to provide or feel best providing, even though that's stupid, because that doesn't even make any sense. Like, why would that isn't how it's supposed to work anymore. Like, the economy is literally not designed for that. And so I think a lot of the issues that we have, we wouldn't even be having if just this particular issue around like people not being able to get over gender dynamics would change. And this leads me to the main thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm barely even going to get time to talk about. But does God's judgment, is there nuance to God's judgment? Does whether God is going to send somebody to heaven or hell depend on the era and the time period? Which I would hope that it does, because if you think about like 300 years ago, when people are only living to their 30s or 40s, and you judge that person on whether they're going to heaven or hell, and you compare that to somebody in the year 2000 who is born and they're inundated with TikTok, which inevitably just, totally demolishes their brain. And, is that their fault? Like, should that person have had the discipline to not use technology in that way? Because we talk about this a lot. I just don't think many people really have that capacity. Like, there's this illusion that, well, God's rules are rigid and they're real and it's strict and it doesn't change based on the time period, and people, it's like a narrow path. It's hard, but it just makes absolutely no sense to me. The same people 300 years ago, if you gave them a phone, they would end up doing the same evil. Like, it's just they didn't have access to it back then. So I don't really understand how, like, they would get to go to heaven, but then because now we're born in this society filled with temptation, that then God would just send all of us to hell. To me, there's something wrong with that. Now, again, I'm not a scholar, so I'm not, like, saying what I think is true. I'm just saying that I would assume God would have the like intellect and the nuance to kind of judge in this way, to look at the context of a person's life and see that like most of us, we didn't choose when to be born. We don't know what's going on. And yeah, as a result of tech and as a result of living in a greedier and wealthier society, it creates people to be blind. Like I was talking about earlier, some people, if their significant other's rich enough, they'd just be lazy and milk it. If their parents are rich enough, they'd be lazy and milk it. And some people might be conscious that it's wrong. Other people might not. You know, there's a lot of very severe amounts of fear and anxiety and stress about things nowadays. A lot of people may be lazy, but they're lazy as a result of being stuck in their own head. Like, they're not lazy because they genuinely don't want to work. It's mainly because society does not really have a place for them. You know, society is, a lot of young people, we're really not being accepted. You try to apply for a place and there's no, they don't want you because you have no experience. And it's really a terrible thing. And I just can't see how God would apply the same strict traditional gender roles or judgments equally now as he did back then, because that would literally make no sense. And I mean, what are people supposed to do? Just become like Amish and just like renounce all electricity and modern amenities, and that's like the only way to get to heaven? I mean, I don't know. I obviously want to know the answer to this, but I just think it's kind of insane. Like, I don't know. Isn't it kind of insane? It feels kind of insane to me, like this, the whole from top to bottom, right? I don't know. So I'm curious. I'm sure this is something that's debated, and I'm sure there's probably not like a mega clear answer about it. But anyways, it's been schla, and now it's time to buy schla. So, see ya schla.